much product that we're looking for, and we will have a raffle.
So,
Sure.
we've already done a little bit of policy. I think it might come fast is people who are interested in talking about own housing, like condo owners, house owners, stay in this room with Heather. And Sarah's going to take the people who are renters or are interested in working with rental buildings back and back behind the windows because it's very echoey room. And that way they can work with the two groups and have a little one-shot plans on the front in both places. So renters back behind the glass doors that are over
Somebody can use that. That's a raffle. Oh, lovely. Okay. What'd you say your name was again? I'm sorry.
Bob.
Nice to meet you, dear Bob.
Okay, well, I like to do names too. So I'm Sarah.
I'm Bob.
Okay.
Betsy.
Betsy.
Kurt.
Kurt. Nice to meet you guys. This is probably something that we could have all done together, but it is a little different because renters get the lovely help from the residential landlord-tenant ordinance. Is everybody aware of the residential landlord-tenant ordinance? Not a good sign. Not a good sign that you're not. Okay. On your lease, you actually should have one of them. If you live in a building that is 6 units and up, or 6 units and down, but your landlord doesn't live there. So if you live in 6 units and your landlord lives in one of those units, you actually aren't covered by the residential landlord-tenant ordinance. The thought process is that he or she, the landlord, has to deal with the same issues that you have to deal with. So he's going to do a good job of upkeeping the apartment. My gender roles are all messed up. I keep calling our landlords he's. Sorry about that. So what is wonderful about the residential landlord-tenant ordinance is that it's, there are a lot of wonderful protections in there for renters and code violations and actions so that you can take up against those code violations. And a very good way to go about this greening of your units is to find out if the code violations or if the windows or if the boiler needs to be replaced anyway because it's not up to code, because it's old, because it's not doing its job. So if you've got a boiler that's not pumping out the right amount of temperature for your unit, or you've got windows that are super duper drafty, those could be code violations. And you can use that as a tactic to get what you want. Okay? So, what I like to do with these Midwest Academy strategy charts is to think of, we're just going to go boom, boom, boom each section and start with what a short-term, a medium-term, and a long-term goal would be. So what are some of the goals you have for your units in your apartment buildings?
Well, I guess for my building, I just know that our our heating system is very inefficient.
Mm-hmm.
I live on the 3rd floor and I have 90-degree heat in the unit all year
Okay,
long.
all year long.
Essentially. And so that's, better than being freezing. But I think it's something that the building should make an investment in improving that it's uncomfortable and it's a waste of money.
And it's a waste of money and energy and all that stuff. Okay, so I hear a bad boiler. What's going on?
Our building just started recycling, big, one of those big dumpster recycling, and I'd like to see, and this is probably shooting way too high, but a composting.
A composting. I actually think that's like a medium level goal. Like that's an intermediate goal that can be done. Boiler is a long-term one. Let's go with your, what's some of your concerns?
Mine's heat related, but I don't know if it's the boiler exactly, but in my apartment, the heat is very uneven. Some parts are really warm and some parts are really cold.
Okay. So those are some of the concerns. So when we're thinking about the goal like that, that would definitely be a long-term goal because making an investment in a boiler, in a new boiler, and especially an energy efficient one, I think $42,000 is actually pretty small. It's sort of like on the lower end because you can get, depending on how big, how many units you live in. If you live in a 100 person unit building, that's a very cheap boiler. It's going to be like a second-hand boiler. But if you're in like a 6 flat or something, then that's probably a good boiler. So you have to think about the big picture of it and what it's going to take to make that happen. But a short-term goal for greening up your apartment could be changing out the light bulbs maybe doing, instead of replacing the windows at that time, would be to do caulking around it, right? So just doing energy efficient things like that. So we put light bulbs and caulking windows, okay? And then an intermediate goal, something that could be done with a little bit of work, more people power than anything else. A little bit of investment by the landlord to create a space for that compost. So that would be a conversation that you would have to have with your landlord. So that would be an intermediate goal that we could do. Okay. The compost. And then a long-term goal would be a boiler replacement. Okay? But we're always working towards all these goals at the same time. And it involves a revolving and an evolving relationship with the landlord. Okay, so then there's the organizational considerations to think of. So these are actually both positive and negative things. If you as an individual wanted to go and get your boiler replaced, what would your first tactic be?
Oh, for the building?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think at least writing an email or a letter to the landlord to see what the situation is, if there's going to be a replacement in any time in the future.
Okay, so writing a letter from one person, and I would almost never recommend to do an email because some landlords are sort of tricky and they never got that email and it ended up in the spam folder, so they never saw it. They didn't get your request for repairs either. So I really do recommend doing a printed out letter or something like that. Now, other thing is he can say to you, Bob, you know what, that's a great idea. I've never heard that problem from anybody else. So, great idea, but probably not gonna happen. But thanks for bringing that to my attention, okay? So that's one person going to them. But if we've got a group of 15 people going to him, he can't just blow it off and say that's just one person's concern, right? So what the first consideration is getting more people involved and having that group effort so that can happen. So what happens in groups is they splinter, things like that happen. So that needs to be taken into consideration. So an organizational consideration would be more people, involving more people, and creating a cohesive group that listens to each other, that works together, okay? So those are the positives of it, of organizational considerations. What other things could we, go ahead.
I'm a little confused on how we're proceeding here.
Sure.
Are we gonna follow each one of these for each one of these as across?
No, it's actually, so our goals, even though they're
There's no-
short, it's not like our short-term organizational consideration or our intermediate. I mean, we could look at it that way, but but like with these goals, we're gonna be working towards them all at the same time in general. Like we're creating a relationship and we're creating a movement or a campaign that we want to accomplish all of our goals. Maybe at different time periods, but we're going to work towards them throughout the whole journey of it. But if we wanted to think about our short-term organizational consideration, we can break it down that way. I was going for more of a big picture. But what would be a short-term organizational?
That's why I was puzzled. You were
Okay.
writing it behind light bulbs. and
Oh,
I was
okay,
thinking,
like,
I don't
where
really feel
people-
the need to organize a group to change my light
So,
bulb.
no, you don't, but that can be a group, a building-wide thing, if you wanted to actually go to an agency that would change out your light bulbs for you, can provide that, because some people aren't gonna do it, they don't have the money for it, right? And that's also another organizational consideration, is having funds to do work with, okay? But more the organizational consideration is what are your resources? What do you have? And you have people. You have you have people power. You have education. You can, you should be educating your neighbors, so you have resources like this. This is an organizational consideration that you have. You go to workshops, things like that. So it's whatever your resources are. Your money, your people, your information. Those are kind of your organizational considerations. Okay? So those are the things that you have to keep in check and figure out what you have. Okay? So people, money, resources, and education. All right. So who cares about this issue? That's what the next one is. Who cares? Who cares if your building's green? Anyone? Do you care? Yeah? Why do you care? You're not quite sure? You know it's the right thing to do?
I care about it in general, so I care about it where I live.
Where you live, okay? So, so who else cares? You care. Your neighbor cares.
I don't know if my neighbor
You
cares.
don't know if your neighbor cares, okay?
So, I mean, you're back to the organizational thing.
Mhm.
People, before you know who cares, you got to know the other people in the building.
You've got to know your other people in the building, exactly. And you've got to do something sort of scary. You've got to go and knock on their door and talk to them. You've got to put up a flyer and say, we're going to have a meeting about this. And you bring people together and you do an education drive around it, using your resources that you have. Information from the internet, information from Pollyanna, from this workshop.
I wouldn't do that.
You wouldn't do that? What would you do?
I would have a get acquainted party
Okay, that's great.
and just get to know people,
Mm-hmm.
and so that I'm getting to know people and care about people as people
As people.
before I bring up an issue.
Okay, that's great. That's a really good. What compels somebody to decide that they want to come to your apartment to hang out with you and get to know you?
Free food.
Always. Always. But it's
Well, and some won't.
exactly.
Because
Yeah.
some would.
Some wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Mhm, right. But sometimes if you pin it towards something that everybody cares about, saving money on their electricity bill, not having to sweat it out at 90 degrees every winter, or not having to freeze at 46 degrees because their place is drafty. So that's why, I think it's a really good idea, and you want to have that social part of it, and to like people for people, but sometimes you're not going to like them, so you should have something that kind of ties people together too, is what their care and their wish is for it.
Well, yeah, I just think that should be step 2 rather than
So step 2. Okay, great. Well, everybody's going to come if you barbecue for them. I'm telling you what, it's the best organizing tool out there is food. But you're not the only people that care about this issue. Who else would care about it?
The city of Chicago and their green CO2 reduction.
Absolutely. Absolutely they care. Your alderman cares too. Your alderman wants to see you investing in your building, investing in your community, and taking an initiative on something. So that's very